The deed is in my name, Edward. It always has been. This apartment is mine. And you're just an inconvenient guest. The words left my lips with a calmness I didn't recognize. 23 years of humiliation. 23 years of swallowing my pride. 23 years of being treated like a burden in my own daughter's life. All of it crystallized in that moment, as I held the blue folder with the red elastic band and watched Edward's face contort into a mask of disbelief and panic. The ensuing silence was deafening. Fernanda, my girl, sat on the couch, eyes wide, tears silently streaming down her face. Edward, this man, who for so long had made me feel like an irritating insect that needed to be squashed, went as pale as a ghost. His hands trembled as he struggled to process what he'd just heard. "This is a lie. You're bluffing," he shouted, but his cracking voice betrayed his desperation. I opened the folder with the calm of someone carrying the truth in their heart. Each document represented years of sacrifice, each stamp a tear silently wiped away, each signature a piece of my soul invested in my daughter's future. And now, in this apartment he so proudly displayed as a trophy of his superiority, Edward discovered he was always just a temporary tenant in the life I built. The authenticated registry was there, dated 15 years ago. Proof of transfers, notarized declarations, everything legal, everything final, everything mine. As he stared at the papers with bulging eyes, I remembered how it all began, how I got here, carrying the weight of being a single mother in a world that doesn't forgive women like me. It was 1985 when Fernanda was born. I was only 20, and Roberto, her father, disappeared as soon as he learned of the pregnancy. "I'm not ready to be a father," he said, before vanishing from my life forever. I was alone, with a child growing inside me and an uncertain future ahead. My mother had died 2 years earlier. My father was never really in my life. It was just me, and that little creature growing inside me. The first few years were the hardest. I worked as a cleaner during the day, in the homes of wealthy people who treated me like a piece of furniture. "Martha, don't forget to clean behind the refrigerator. Martha, be careful not to break anything. Martha, could you come in on Saturday too?" My name always pronounced with that condescending tone, as if I were a child being instructed. At night, when Fernanda finally slept, I sewed. I mended clothes for the neighbors, hemmed pants, embroidered tablecloths. Each stitch was a silent prayer for a better future for the two of us. I remember the nights when Fernanda had a fever and I didn't have the money to buy medicine. I'd run to the corner pharmacy and beg the pharmacist, "Please, Mr. Jones, it's just until the end of the week, I promise I'll pay." He always gave in, that kind man who is no longer with us. It was these small acts of kindness that made me believe that there was still humanity in the world. Fernanda grew up watching me struggle. I never hid our reality from her, but I also never let her feel less because of it. "We're poor in money, but rich in love," I'd say while combing her curly hair before school. She was a smart, studious, dreamy girl. When she told me about her plans to be a doctor, I'd smile and say, "You'll do it, my daughter. Mom will do everything to make it happen." And I did. Gradually, I started saving every penny. I kept coins in an old cookie tin, hidden at the back of the closet. When the tin was full, I'd go to the bank and deposit it in savings. For Fernanda's future, I'd write in my little account book. Years went by, and that amount started to grow. It wasn't much, but it was hope materialized in numbers. When Fernanda turned 16, something happened that would change our lives forever. Mr. Benedict, an elderly gentleman who worked at the local courthouse and for whom I had been sewing for years, called me for a talk. "Martha," he said, "you're a smart woman, but you're thinking small." He explained about investments, about how saved money could yield more if invested properly. "There's an apartment in the Wicker Park neighborhood that's being sold for well below market value. The owner is in debt and wants to get rid of it quickly," he said. At first, I thought it was crazy. How could I, a simple cleaner, buy an apartment? But Mr. Benedict insisted. "You've already saved a good down payment, Martha. And with the rent you pay at your current place, you could finance the rest." We went to see the property together. It was a simple apartment, 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a kitchenette. Nothing luxurious, but it was ours. It could be ours. That night, I couldn't sleep. Fernanda was studying for her college entrance exams, dreaming of medical school, and there I was, faced with the possibility of giving her something I never had: security. A home that no one could take away from her. I made the bravest decision of my life. With Mr. Benedict's help, we managed to finance the apartment. But here's the detail that would change everything years later. I put the deed in my name. It's better this way, Mr. Benedict explained. You're the owner of the house. You can do whatever you want with it. If one day your daughter gets married and something goes wrong, she's protected. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Fernanda barely had a boyfriend. How could I imagine marital problems? How wrong I was. We moved into the apartment when Fernanda started college. She got a scholarship, my brilliant girl, and I kept working as a housekeeper to pay the basic bills. The apartment was modest, but it was our little corner of the world. Fernanda studied at the dining room table. I sewed in the kitchen, and on Sundays we made special lunches to celebrate every small victory. It was during her junior year that Fernanda met Edward. She came home radiant, telling me about an amazing guy she'd met at the university. He's a business administration graduate. Mom works for a big company. He's different from everyone else, she said, her eyes shining. I smiled, happy to see her in love, but something deep down in my heart warned me. Maybe it was a mother's intuition. Maybe it was the experience of having been abandoned before. Edward was handsome. I can't deny it. Tall, neatly cut hair, expensive clothes, an easy smile. When I met him, he was polite, but there was something about the way he looked at our apartment that bothered me. It was an appraising look, as if he were calculating the value of each piece of furniture, each room. And the way he spoke to me, always respectful, but with that distance we keep from people we consider inferior. You have a wonderful daughter, Mrs. Martha, he'd say. But his eyes didn't meet mine when he spoke. Fernanda graduated, and a few months later, Edward proposed. The ceremony was simple, at the courthouse, just close family. I was happy for my daughter, of course, but my heart felt heavy. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my girl to someone who didn't deserve her. Soon after the wedding, things started to subtly change. Fernanda, who always visited me 2 or 3 times a week, started coming less often. When she did come, she seemed different, quieter, more tense. Is everything all right, my daughter? I'd ask. Yes, Mom, it's just work has been hectic, she'd reply. But her eyes told a different story. Edward gradually began to show his true colors. First, there were seemingly innocent comments about our apartment. You could think about moving to a bigger place, he'd say. During Sunday lunches, Fernanda deserves something better. The phrase bothered me deeply. What did he mean by something better? Our apartment was small, yes, but it was clean, organized, full of love. Wasn't it good enough for him? Then came the comments about my work. Don't you think about retiring, Mrs. Martha? Fernanda is worried about you working so hard in strangers' houses. He spoke with a patronizing tone that made me grit my teeth, as if my work were something shameful, something that diminished the value of his family. But the worst were the comments about our past. On one occasion, during a barbecue at his sister's house, I overheard Edward talking to his in-laws about how he had helped Fernanda escape poverty. You don't know how they lived before, he said, with the tone of someone doing charity. Small apartment, mother working as a housekeeper. Thank God Fernanda found me. That day, I felt my blood boil. I went up to him, and in the calmest voice I could muster, said, Edward, can I talk to you for a minute? I took him aside and looked him straight in the eyes. That apartment you criticize so much was bought with the sweat of my brow. And my daughter didn't need to be saved by anyone. She always had love, education, and dignity. What you call poverty, I call character. He laughed. He laughed in my face. You're right, Mrs. Martha. I'm sorry if I expressed myself poorly. But the mischievous glint in his eyes told me he wasn't sorry at all. From then on, the silent war began. Edward treated me like a burden he had to endure for the sake of his wife. When I visited Fernanda at their apartment, a luxurious place he'd rented to impress, he greeted me with false cordiality. Hi, mother-in-law. How are you? Would you like some coffee? But there was venom in that forced politeness. I realized he was trying to drive a wedge between Fernanda and me. He started scheduling weekend commitments, precisely during the times she usually visited me. "Honey, remember we have that lunch with my clients," he'd say, when she mentioned coming to see me. Or how about we spend Sunday looking at that new apartment that's for sale? Fernanda's visits became increasingly rare, and when she did come, I noticed worrying changes. My daughter, who was always talkative and cheerful, was more withdrawn. She smiled less, spoke little about her life, and avoided the subject when I asked about Edward. One afternoon, I noticed a purple mark on her arm. "What's that, Fernanda?" "Oh, Mom." I bumped into the car door. Silly thing. But the way she pulled her sleeve down to cover the mark told me everything I needed to know. My heart broke at that moment. My girl was being hurt, and I didn't know how to help her. I tried to talk to her, but whenever I touched on the subject of her marriage, Fernanda changed the subject or invented an excuse to leave early. "I'm fine, Mom. You're imagining things," she insisted. But a mother knows. A mother always knows when her child is suffering. It was on a rainy March afternoon that everything changed. I was sewing in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell ring insistently. I opened the door and found Fernanda soaking wet, trembling, her eyes swollen from crying. She threw herself into my arms like she did when she was little. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," she sobbed. I took her inside, made her some hot tea, wrapped her in my warmest robe, and waited. Sometimes, silence is the best medicine. After half an hour of crying, she finally started to talk. "He humiliates me every day, Mom. He says I'm stupid, that I don't understand anything about money, that I should be grateful he pulled me out of the gutter. Yesterday, he yelled at me in front of his friends because I disagreed with something he said about politics. He called me ill-mannered and said it was a product of my upbringing. Every word was a dagger to my heart. How dare Edward talk about my daughter like that? About the upbringing I gave her with so much love and dedication. And it's not just that, Mom," Fernanda continued. "He controls all the money. I can't buy anything without asking his permission. He says that since I don't contribute to the household expenses, I have no right to have an opinion on spending. I feel like a prisoner. Why didn't you tell me before, my daughter?" "Because I was ashamed, Mom. Ashamed of having made the wrong choice. Ashamed to admit you were right when you said he wasn't good for me." That night, Fernanda slept at home. She slept in her single bed, in the room I never changed, always waiting for her to need to come back. While she rested, I stayed awake planning. I wouldn't allow my daughter to suffer another day at the hands of that man. The next day, I tried to convince Fernanda to separate. "You're young, intelligent, educated. You can start over," I said. But she was scared. "Mom, he says that if I leave I'll have nowhere to live, that you can't afford to support me, that I'll end up crawling back to him begging him to take me back. What if I told you that you do have a place to live?" I asked, holding her hands. "What do you mean?" That's when I told her about the apartment deed. Fernanda was shocked. For all these years she believed we were renting, that I was paying off a mortgage. She never imagined that the apartment was mine, paid off for over 5 years. "Why didn't you ever tell me that, Mom?" "Because I wanted you to fly with your own wings, my daughter. But now it's time for you to know that you'll always have a safe place to come back to." Fernanda returned home that morning, with newfound courage. She told Edward she wanted to talk about their relationship, that things needed to change. His response was predictable. He yelled, humiliated, belittled. And for the first time, my daughter didn't cower. "If you're not happy, you can leave," Edward said. "But don't come looking for me when you find out that the world out there isn't as easy as your mommy made you believe." From that day on, the war intensified. Edward started talking about selling the apartment where they lived, even without Fernanda's consent. He brought people home to assess the property, always when she wasn't there. And it was during one of these episodes that he made the mistake that would seal his fate. It was a Sunday, and I had gone to have lunch at their house, one of the rare occasions when Edward still tolerated me out of pure formality. During lunch, 2 men in suits appeared at the doorbell. Edward greeted them as if they were old friends. "These are the realtors who are going to help us sell the apartment," he announced, looking directly at me. Fernanda turned pale. "Edward, we haven't talked about selling. You don't need to worry about that, honey. A real man handles these things himself." The realtors began to walk through the apartment, measuring, taking notes, commenting on the property's potential. Edward accompanied them, all proud, as if he were the king of the castle, and it was when one of the realtors asked about the documentation that everything crumbled. "Do you have the deed on hand, sir?" the man asked. Of course, Edward said, but his voice wavered slightly. "It's just that we need to check if everything is correct in the registry, if there are no outstanding issues." Edward turned red. "Well, actually, the documentation is with my wife. She takes care of these things." Fernanda looked at him in astonishment. "Edward, you said you handled all the important papers." It was in that moment of tension that Edward completely lost control. He turned to me and, in front of the realtors, in front of his own daughter, poured out all the venom he had in his heart. "You know what?" he said, pointing his finger at me. "You should move out, you know. This place isn't yours anymore. Actually, it never was. You're just a stubborn old woman who doesn't understand that times have changed. Your daughter grew up, got married, now she has a real life. Stop interfering, and go mind your own business." The silence that followed was deafening. The realtors looked at each other, embarrassed. Fernanda started to cry. And I felt a strange calm take over my being. It was as if all those years of humiliation, all those sleepless nights sewing, all those silent sacrifices had prepared me for this exact moment. I got up slowly, with the dignity of someone carrying the truth in their chest. I went to the bedroom, which one day would be Fernanda's, but which Edward had turned into his office, opened the secret drawer of the old wooden cabinet that I had brought from the old apartment, and took out the blue folder with the red elastic band. I returned to the living room, and placed the folder on the table, right in the middle, where everyone could see. The realtors stopped talking. Edward stopped gesturing. Fernanda stopped crying. The world stopped. "The deed is in my name, Edward. It always has been. This apartment is mine. And you're just an inconvenient guest." Watching his panicked expression, seeing his hands tremble as he flipped through the authenticated documents, I felt complete. Not with a thirst for revenge, but with the satisfaction of someone who had finally shown their true strength. "This is a lie. You're bluffing," he shouted, but his voice cracked. I opened the folder with the serenity of a queen displaying her crown jewels. Each document told the story of a mother who would never leave her daughter helpless. The property deed, dated 15 years ago, was impeccable. The payment receipts, the notary statements, everything stamped, everything official. How is this possible?" Edward stammered. "It's possible, because while you dreamed of owning things, I already owned what truly matters," I replied. "While you spent your energy humiliating, I spent mine building. While you talked about what you were going to do, I did it." The real estate agents discreetly withdrew, murmuring apologies. Edward tried one last shot, appealing to Fernanda. "Honey, you're not going to let your mother do this to us, are you? We're a couple, we need to solve this together." But my daughter, my courageous girl, looked at him with a coldness I had never seen before. "We were never a couple, Edward. Couples respect each other. Couples make decisions together. You always treated me like your possession, and now you find out that not even the house you live in is yours." In the days that followed, Edward tried everything. First, he tried to win me over with forced gifts and kindness. "Mrs. Martha, how about we renovate the kitchen? I'll pay," he offered with a desperate smile. When that didn't work, he resorted to veiled threats. "You don't want to create problems for your daughter, do you? After all, we're a family now." But it was too late. The truth had been set free, and like all truths, it was irreversible. Fernanda started therapy, something Edward had always criticized, saying that you air your dirty laundry at home. With the support of her therapist, she found the strength to make the most courageous decision of her life, to file for divorce. "Mom," she said one afternoon, as we were having tea in our kitchen, "thank you for protecting me, when I didn't even know I needed protection. A mother always knows, my daughter, and a mother always protects, even when she can't explain why. If you've come this far in this story, it's because you know the value of a narrative that touches the heart. There are so many stories like this that need to be told, so many women who need to be heard. If you identified with this journey, subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss the next stories we'll share. Because each story is a light that can illuminate someone's path." Edward left the apartment on a Tuesday morning, taking only his clothes and his wounded pride. There was no drama, no shouting. He simply packed his bags and left, as if finally admitting an inevitable defeat. At the door he turned to me and said, in a voice I had never heard before, You always knew, didn't you? Knew what, Edward? That I wasn't good enough for your daughter. I looked at him with the same serenity I had found that fateful Sunday. I always knew my daughter deserved better, and now she knows it too. After he left, Fernanda and I hugged in the middle of the empty living room. We cried together, not out of sadness, but out of relief. It was as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from our shoulders. And now, Mom, she asked. Now we start over. Together. Today, 3 years later, I live in the apartment I bought with the sweat of my brow, now renovated with the colors I always dreamed of. Fernanda lives with me again, at least for now. She's doing postgraduate studies, and dating a kind young man, who treats her the way she deserves to be treated, like a princess, not a possession. I have a grandson now, little Roberto, who is named after the grandfather he never knew, but who carries his grandmother's strength in his blood. When I hold him in my arms and look into his curious little eyes, I think about everything I've been through, all the nights I cried in silence, all the times I felt small in the face of the arrogance of men like Edward. Fernanda still works as a doctor, my pride, my achievement. Sometimes when she comes home tired from the hospital, I make tea and we sit on the porch to talk. Mom, she said the other day, how did you know I would need protection? I didn't know, my daughter. I just hoped I wouldn't need it. But a mother prepares for all possibilities. What if I had never married Edward? What if I had chosen someone good? Then you would have found out about the apartment on the day of my funeral. I laughed. And you would have been mad at me for not telling you sooner. Fernanda laughed too, and in that moment I understood that our journey had been worthwhile. All the pain, all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, everything had led to this moment of peace. The other day, I ran into Edward at the supermarket. He was thinner, with graying hair, accompanied by a much younger woman. When he saw me, he looked down, embarrassed. The woman, curious, asked who I was. Someone from my past, he murmured. I smiled. Hello, Edward. How are you? Fine, Mrs. Martha. You? How are you? I'm great. Thank you for asking. He nodded and walked away, pulling his girlfriend by the arm. I felt sorry for him in that moment. Not anger, not satisfaction at his situation, just pity. Because I understood that men like Edward live trapped in their own arrogance, unable to see the beauty that exists in simplicity, in true love, in silent dignity. Returning home, I reflected on how much my life had changed. For decades, I felt tiny in the face of the world. I worked in other people's houses, cleaning their floors, washing their clothes, listening to their orders with my head bowed. Many times, I'd come home feeling invisible, as if my existence didn't matter to anyone but Fernanda. But that Sunday changed everything. Not because I discovered I had power. I always had. It changed because I finally used that power. I discovered that silent strength is worth more than 1,000 shouted words. That the truth, when revealed at the right moment, has the power to transform everything. Today, when I walk the streets of the neighborhood, I feel different. I still work, now as a private seamstress, at home, without a boss telling me what to do. But I no longer have to lower my head to anyone. I learned that dignity isn't something you gain or lose. It's something you carry within yourself. Fernanda sometimes asks me if I don't feel lonely living alone with her and the baby. I reply that loneliness is when you feel small in the presence of other people. I feel gigantic, even when I'm alone. The neighborhood friends comment that I've changed, that I'm more self-assured. You're different, Martha, they say. And I reply, I'm not different. I'm being myself for the first time in my life. It's not a responsibility, Marcus, I replied. It's a privilege, and I'm happy to share it with someone who truly understands her worth. He nodded, his eyes moist. You raised an extraordinary woman, and I want to be worthy of her love. That conversation made me realize that my mission as a mother was complete. Not that I would stop being a mother, we never stop, but that I had managed to teach Fernanda the most important thing, her own self-worth. She wouldn't be marrying again out of need, fear of being alone, or social pressure. She would be marrying for true love, with someone who respects and values her. Edward gave me the greatest gift, without knowing it. He forced me to reveal my strength. If he had been a kind and respectful son-in-law, perhaps I never would have needed to show what I was capable of. Perhaps I would have died without Fernanda knowing the extent of my love for her. Perhaps the blue folder would have remained forever hidden in the secret drawer. But life has these ironies. Sometimes we need an antagonist to discover our capacity for protagonism. Sometimes we need someone who tries to diminish us to discover our true stature. Last week, while organizing the closets, I found an old photo of Fernanda and me. She must have been about 10, smiling with a few missing baby teeth, and I was behind her, my hands on her shoulders. Looking at that photo, I saw two things: a little girl who completely trusted her mother's protection, and a young woman who didn't yet know what she was capable of. Today, we are different people. Fernanda is a self-assured woman, who doesn't accept scraps of love, who knows her worth and defends it. And I am a woman who discovered that strength doesn't need to shout to be heard. I keep that photo in the blue folder, along with the deed to the apartment. One day, when I'm no longer here, Fernanda will find everything together: the legal proof that she was always protected, and the emotional proof that she was always loved unconditionally. But for now, I'm here, alive, strong, worthy, taking care of my grandson, supporting my daughter, living peacefully in the home I conquered. And whenever someone tries to make me feel small, because there will always be someone trying, I remember that Sunday when I placed a blue folder on the table and changed the story of 3 lives. The deed is still in my name, the apartment is still mine, and I remain the woman who learned that silence can be deafening, that true humility is different from submission, and that sometimes the sweetest victory is the one no one sees coming. This is my story. The story of a cleaning lady who became a homeowner, of a single mother who became the matriarch of the family, of an underestimated woman who revealed herself to be unbeatable. It's the story of all of us who carry silent truths in our hearts, waiting for the right moment to reveal them to the world. And when that moment comes, and it always comes, remember me. Remember that strength can be gentle, that victory can be silent, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon we have is simply the truth, patiently guarded until the moment it can make all the difference. The blue folder is still here, now in the same drawer where I keep my most precious things. Sometimes I open it, not out of need, but out of satisfaction, to remind myself that I am the owner of my own story, the architect of my own destiny, the author of my own dignity, and that no one, absolutely no one, can take that away from me.